Banana Island woke with curated grace. Yachts whispering across the lagoon, gardeners training hedges into obedient geometry, peach lights sliding over glass like a signature. From his terrace, Winston Armstrong watched it all and sipped espresso. A prince of a kingdom he hadn't asked to inherit, 28 and professionally unbothered. "Darling, are you listening?" his mother asked, stepping out in cream silk and pearls. Evelyn Armstrong never merely arrived. She executed. "I heard, darling," he said. Everything after sounded like chamber music. She placed a leather folio between the cups. 2 dinners, 1 charity brunch, a private gallery tour. You will attend all 4. You will be pleasant. You will not open with prenups. "You've had 2 years to explore the concept of irresponsibility," she replied, softening for a breath before rearming. "Your father wanted you happy. Happiness in our world requires judgment and company." "Love by procurement," Winston said. "How modern." "It's risk management." She produced photographs. Ariana Beaumont, dark hair, posture that could slice glass, family that owned half of Victoria Island. Genevieve Carlisle, art world royalty. "Tonight, Ariana, 7:30, La Terrasse." "La Terrasse hates me." "Go anyway." At 7:52, he swept into linen and low lighting, a room where the plates looked like sculpture and the waiters moved like choreography. Ariana rose to greet him, dressed the color of expensive secrets. "You must be Winston," she said, "and you must be time indifferent." "Time agnostic," he corrected, taking the seat the maitre d' had angled to make his reflection complicit. They ordered, she, sea bass. He, a tasting menu that needed a preface about sourcing. He asked about her work, her interests, her philanthropy. Then he turned every answer into distance. She loved classical piano. He confessed to a traumatic university season of experimental bagpipes. She praised minimalism. He rhapsodized about maximalist marble. She mentioned children someday. He announced himself pro-godchildren and aggressively neutral on toys within sightlines. Ariana's smile stayed polite, then brittle. "What do you actually want, Winston?" 7 hours of sleep in a world without per my last email. And in a partner? A miraculous absence of pressure. Dessert arrived. A cloud so delicate it looked undecided. He tasted it, called it existential. Ariana set her napkin down with priestly finality. "This was instructive," she said, standing. "Tell your mother I remain charming to the end." "She'll adore that," he replied. "It's her favorite genre." Back on his terrace, he texted her a photograph of the moon. Date 2 arrived in black tie. The Lagos Symphony Gala, where diamonds winked and deals married themselves in corners. Genevieve Carlisle met him at the staircase, white satin, curated nonchalance. "You clean up," she said. "I delegate," he answered, offering his arm. They made the circuit, donors, directors, a senator whose handshake felt like a polite threat. Winston performed with lazy precision, then began to derail. He excused himself to take 3 calls that did not exist. He introduced Genevieve to a venture capitalist who collected conversations about cryptocurrency tax law. He requested a waltz and, once the orchestra obliged, admitted he did not dance, guiding her to a balcony conveniently upwind from the hors d'oeuvres. "So you're allergic to effort," she said at last. Patience lacquered. "Only to inevitability." She lifted her chin toward the mezzanine, where Evelyn surveyed the room like a benevolent drone. "Your mother is invested." "My mother is the stock market." "Then I won't short her," Genevieve said, gentling. "But I'm not a rescue mission." Winston's smile turned honest. "Neither am I." They parted before the encore. Evelyn arrived the next morning without knocking. She circled his living room like an appraiser. "Ariana," she asked. "Charming to the end." "Genevieve?" "Not a rescue mission." She exhaled through her nose. "Evelyn for DEFCON 2. You are not avoiding marriage. You are avoiding possibility." "I'm avoiding theater." "You adore theater. Only from a balcony." She sat, pearls settling with a sound like small decisions. "You think your father and I married for optics. We didn't. He was the one person who refused to be impressed by us." Winston studied the skyline beyond the glass. Towers signed in light. Maybe I haven't met someone unimpressible. Or you keep arriving as the performance instead of the person. He rubbed his jaw, a 12-hour shave rasping. What would it look like if I arrived as the person? On time, she said dryly, then softer. And curious. He laughed despite himself. Curious is expensive. Everything worth it is, she said, rising. At the door, she paused. I've scheduled a meeting for you tomorrow. Not a date, a meeting. Please try not to turn it into an anecdote. With whom? A media executive. Young, effective. Not from our circles. Name? Evelyn smiled in a way that meant no. You'll see. After she left, the apartment felt larger, the way rooms do when they've just won an argument. Winston crossed past the grand piano he refused to play when anyone could hear, to the wall of glass where the city performed its glittering, silent play. He wasn't a villain. He tipped well, donated more, and practiced an absent kindness that required no intimacy. He simply didn't see the logic of inserting a stranger into a schedule with no white space. His calendar chimed. A new block set at noon, Victoria Island, 30 minutes at a building where stories were packaged and sold. A meeting, not a date, young, effective, not from their circles. He set his phone down, looked at himself in the glass until the person there felt almost reachable, then poured water instead of whiskey and set an alarm he rarely used. On time and curious, he thought. It sounded like a dare. He set his shoulders. Across the lagoon, the skyline dimmed like a house preparing for guests. Winston Armstrong, beautifully bored, meticulously defended, did not know the next introduction would refuse to be impressed and, for the rest of his life, would refuse to be an anecdote. The Sky Lounge at Eco Pearl Towers floated above the city like it owned the horizon. Glass walls shimmered with reflections of Lagos's neon heartbeat, and a soft jazz trio played in a corner, just loud enough to make conversations sound intimate. Winston Armstrong pushed through the revolving doors in his tailored navy blazer, his mother's latest suggestion burning in the back of his mind. He didn't want to be here. He'd made that clear over breakfast when Evelyn had casually mentioned a special introduction she'd arranged for the evening. Normally, he would have fabricated an emergency meeting to dodge it. Tonight, however, he decided to humor her. Give her 30 minutes, smile politely, leave. His mother's matches were always predictable, poised women with curated laughs, well-rehearsed talking points, and an unshakable interest in what it meant to be Mrs. Armstrong. He'd learned to navigate them like bad press, acknowledge, deflect, and disappear. Spotting a woman seated alone near the window, Winston didn't hesitate. She had a quiet elegance about her. Dark hair swept back in a sleek bun, a tailored white suit that somehow managed to look both corporate and magnetic. A single champagne flute sat in front of her, untouched. She was scrolling through her phone, the light catching the subtle rose gold trim of her watch. Winston smiled to himself. At least she's punctual. He walked straight over, slipping into the seat opposite her, without waiting for an invitation. Good evening, he said smoothly. I'm Winston Armstrong. Let's get the boring parts out of the way. No, I'm not looking for a fairy tale romance. I don't believe in love at first sight, and my ideal evening involves silence and good whiskey. The woman looked up, her eyes sharp, amber brown, studying him like headlines she was deciding whether to print. Interesting icebreaker, she said, setting her phone aside, though I wasn't aware we were interviewing for your free time. Winston chuckled. Trust me, neither was I. But I like efficiency. No point wasting each other's time if we're not aligned. She tilted her head, the corner of her mouth curling. Go on then. What else don't you like? Small talk, he replied without pause, pretending to enjoy events I'd rather leave. People who brag about being busy. And anyone who treats waitstaff poorly. She leaned back in her chair, clearly amused. And what do you like? Winston took a slow sip of water. Directness, intelligence. People who can hold a conversation that doesn't sound like a press release. And anyone who knows the difference between ambition and desperation. For the first time in a long while, he noticed his date wasn't forcing a laugh or nodding just to be polite. She was engaged, really engaged. "You're not bad at this," she said, "almost convincing me you have layers." He smirked. "Almost?" "Almost," she repeated, her gaze flicking briefly to the view before returning to him. They talked about Lagos traffic as an endurance sport, the absurdity of corporate networking events, and the rise of boutique luxury in West Africa. She was quick-witted, confident, and, unlike anyone else his mother had paraded in front of him, utterly unafraid to challenge him. When he teased her about her sharp comebacks, she fired one right back without missing a beat. For the first time in years, Winston found himself enjoying a date enough to lose track of time. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I have to say, from all the girls my mother's introduced me to, you are, by far, the best." Her brows shot up. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Winston said, smiling. "You're sharp, you're interesting. It's almost unsettling." She blinked and laughed, though it was tinged with confusion. "Wait, did you just say your mother introduced us?" "Yes," he replied easily. "Didn't she tell you?" "I assumed." "Assumed what?" she cut in, leaning forward. "That I was one of your mother's little matchmaking projects?" He frowned. "You're not?" "No," she said, her voice laced with both amusement and disbelief. "I'm Ruby Okinawa. I've been sitting here for 20 minutes waiting for my business partner to arrive. This," she gestured between them, "is not a date." For a moment, Winston just stared at her, the realization settling like ice water down his spine. "You're not Ariana Beaumont?" Ruby's laugh was genuine now, low and warm. "Not even close." Winston ran a hand over his jaw. "Well, that's awkward." "Just a bit," she said, sipping her champagne at last. "So you sat down, uninvited, and started unloading your entire personal manifesto, thinking I was here to audition for a relationship?" "When you put it like that," Winston said, "it sounds terrible." "It is terrible," Ruby replied, though her smile softened the words. He leaned back, feigning nonchalance. "In my defense, I did think you were refreshingly intelligent for one of my mother's setups." "Oh, well," she said dryly. "In that case, I'm flattered." They shared a brief silence, the city's hum filling the space between them. Then Winston straightened. "Look, my mistake aside, this has been the most interesting conversation I've had in a while." Ruby raised a brow. "You realize you've just complimented me and insulted everyone else you've spoken to tonight in the same breath?" "Efficiency," he said again, grinning. She shook her head, clearly fighting a smile. "You're something else, Winston Armstrong." "Is that a good thing?" "Jury's still out." He hesitated only a second before leaning forward. "Then let's give the jury more evidence. May I have your number?" Ruby studied him, weighing her options. "For what? You don't believe in fairy tales, remember?" "True," he said, "but I do believe in second conversations." Her lips curved, slow and deliberate, as she slid her phone across the table. "Type it in before I change my mind." Winston keyed in his number as well, handing it back. "You'll regret this," he said lightly. "I doubt it," she replied, "but we'll see." As Winston rose to leave, he glanced back at her, a rare flicker of curiosity tugging at his thoughts. For the first time, a woman had managed to throw him off balance, and he found himself strangely looking forward to what might happen next. The trouble didn't arrive like a thunderclap. It slid into Winston Armstrong's morning as a headline. "Regulator freezes Armstrong's Ocean Crest Tower. Investors rattle below it." A looping clip, a drone shot of the Echo Atlantic site, cranes arrested mid-swing, operatives in yellow vests waiting in place. "Tell me the upside," Winston said, dropping into his chair. Julian Reed, his CFO, didn't smile. "There isn't one. Environmental Standards wants a drainage review. 2 anchor investors are nervous. Pre-sales are—" He lifted a palm. "Softening." "How soft?" "Pillow Fort soft." Sloan Whitaker, head of corporate communications, slid a tablet across the table. "Someone leaked internal emails about a supplier substitution. Out of context, it reads like we cut corners." A blogger also posted last night's water pooling on the access road. It rained, Winston said. It also trended, Sloan replied. Narratives don't need proof. They need momentum. Lawyers could slow regulators. Engineers could over-document integrity. None of that addressed the real threat: confidence. We need a voice, Sloan said. Julian cleared his throat. Okinawa Media Group is who I trust with a fire like this. The Sky Lounge mix-up flashed in Winston's mind. Ruby Okinawa, laughing, not unkindly when he called her the best of his mother's dates. He had enjoyed that conversation too much to admit. It had also been a mistake. Set the call, he said. Ruby personally? Sloan asked. With whoever can put this back on rails. He dialed from the terrace to avoid the room's watching faces. Ruby Okinawa. Winston Armstrong, he said. I owe you another apology and a proposal. You do know how to open, she said. My project's under review. The market is already writing its ending. I need you to help rewrite it. Honest, at least, she answered. 4 o'clock. Our headquarters, Victoria Island. Bring whoever signs your checks. I'll be there. Okinawa Media Group's offices looked like a decision no one questioned. Pale stone, high ceilings, a reception desk that seemed to float. The conference room was glass on 3 sides, with a view that pushed the island out like a spread of cards. Ruby stood at the head of the table in black, a tablet in one hand, a slim gold pen in the other. Mr. Armstrong, she said. Team. Winston introduced Julian and Sloan. Ruby introduced her strategist, Parker Lane, and legal, Noel Hart. The names sounded like contracts. Bring me truth, Ruby said, no preamble. Not the version your board prefers. Sloan laid out the facts, the permit status, the compliance record, the rainy night photo, the emails about the substitution, technically allowable, optically terrible. Ruby listened, then set her pen down. You don't have a construction problem. You have a trust problem. The narrative has you running faster than your integrity. We can't counter that with glossy renders. We weren't going to, Sloan said. We turned this into a leadership moment, Ruby continued. Open the site to cameras. Ours first, then carefully chosen outlets. Put your engineers on record. Publish compliance documentation in plain language. Pair it with a community initiative that isn't performative. Cost? Julian asked. High, Ruby said. Less than a stalled tower. She slid a one-page proposal across the table. The numbers were firm, the timeline brutal, the deliverables surgical, an executive address, a microsite with live dashboards, third-party validators, investor briefings, influencer briefings that avoided the word influencer and a blackout on anonymous sources. And the conditions? Winston asked. Ruby met his eyes. Full access to the truth. If I find rot, we stop and fix it before we sell it. No surprises from your board. No edits to my team beyond legal necessity. And, for the avoidance of doubt, she let it hang. For the avoidance of doubt, he prompted. She didn't look away. We keep this professional. Whatever happened at the Sky Lounge stays off your crisis plan and outside my office. Sloan's brows lifted a millimeter. Julian's pen paused. Winston could have defaulted to charm. He put it down. Agreed. Ruby nodded. Then we begin now. Parker will coordinate with Sloan on the narrative spine. Noel will talk to your counsel. Winston, I want you on camera at 7 a.m. tomorrow. Not on a teleprompter. On conviction. I don't do stagey sincerity, he said. Good, she replied. Do real. They broke for 10 minutes. Winston stepped to the window as the sun fell into a burnished line. He could see the island's streets thread themselves with headlights, a river of purpose. Sloan joined him. She's the right call. She is. You okay with the boundary? I'm grateful for it, he said, surprised by how true it sounded. Back at the table, Ruby clicked a remote. A headline map filled the screen. Narrative nodes from regulator to rumor mill. We'll give people a better story to tell about you, she said. Not a false one, a better true one. Is that your motto? Julian asked. It's my filter, Ruby said. A runner slid in with files. Ruby didn't look up. Thank you. She tapped her tablet. Winston, one more thing. Someone inside is either careless or malicious. The leak reads curated. Check your board chats, quietly. He felt it as a pinch behind the ribs. Any suspects? I prefer evidence, but momentum rarely starts itself. He thought of Harold Preston, the board's silvered lion who hated the tower's audacity, of a junior aide with a too-sharp suit, of the gravity of chaos. He filed them all. Ruby closed the meeting with an instruction that sounded like a promise. At 6:59 tomorrow, you'll be nervous, she said. At 7, you'll tell the truth. At 7:05, we'll own what comes next. Winston held her gaze. Understood. Good. She extended her hand. Welcome to your least comfortable and most necessary week. He took it. Her grip was cool and decisive. Certainty lit like a small, disciplined flame behind his ribs. Outside, Victoria Island glittered. Inside, the war room began to hum now. At 6:41 a.m., the green room at Okinawa Media Group felt colder than glass. Winston sat on a sofa, jacket off, cuffs rolled. The speech on the table was spectacular and useless. Ruby tapped it. Throw it out. It took Sloan 4 hours. It reads like you're auditioning to be forgiven, she said. You're not. You're being responsible. He looked at the lens beyond the glass wall. What do I say instead? Say what you'd tell your father if he asked what went wrong and what you're doing about it, she said. Look at the camera like it's him. Parker brought sentiment graphs. Noel conferred with legal. Sloan adjusted a light. Julian sent a single ready. Ruby crouched to eye level. You're ready. You just don't like being seen without armor. I wore a jacket. Take it off on air if you need to, she said. Keep the sincerity. At 6:59, she walked him to the mark. The live banner pulsed red. Through the glass, Victoria Island lay silver. 3, the floor manager mouthed. Winston breathed, thought of his father's dry humor, the way leadership meant being first to tell the hard truth. He began. Good morning. I'm Winston Armstrong. Ocean Crest Tower is under regulatory review. Here's what that means and what it doesn't. His voice surprised him, calm even. Not an apology, but an accounting. He laid out the drainage study, the supplier substitution in context, the rainstorm video. He didn't scold rumors. He acknowledged fear. He announced an open site day, live-streamed inspections, and a portal with compliance documents in plain language. He thanked the regulator. He promised to pause any marketing that outpaced facts. He finished. My name is on the building, but so are your investments in this city skyline. I will not trade long-term trust for short-term speed. Red faded to black. The room stayed quiet. Ruby's smile was small. That was real. He laughed, shaky with adrenaline. I didn't throw up. You didn't even blink too much. Phones lit. Sloan scanned dashboards. Shift detected, negative down, neutral up, early positive from a planner who hates everyone. Julian poked in. Anchors replied, watching closely. Appreciate transparency. Ruby's hand brushed his sleeve as she passed. We move. Sight at 9. The convoy rolled through Echo Atlantic, cameras on rigs like white insects. The superintendent, Hayes Mercer, met them in a hard hat. Ruby's producer walked the path, marking angles that turned steel and sand into competence. Winston stepped onto the temporary platform. The air smelled like salt and wet concrete. He felt the crew watch for tells. Impatience, vanity, deflection. He wanted them to see something else. Let's begin with the unflattering parts, he told the camera. Drainage first. Engineers spoke without spin. Noel flagged a phrase. They reshot it. Sloan narrated the live dashboard going online. Ruby watched the monitors, calling for cuts only when clarity demanded it. By noon, the live stream had more viewers than any Armstrong announcement since the reveal. Comments scrolled fast, half skepticism, half relief. A rival subtweeted. An architecture critic dunked on the rival. Ruby allowed herself a smile. The investor briefing at 2 felt less like a tribunal and more like a seminar. Winston kept the jacket off, sleeves neat, tone steady. Asked about timelines, he said, We'll earn our way back to speed. Asked about cost, he answered with numbers, and the phrase acceptable because necessary. Afterward, in the corridor, Ruby handed him water. You learn fast. I have an aggressive teacher. Flattery archived, she said. Good work. Dinner tonight, he said before thinking. As a thank you. Private, quiet. Echo Pearl. You can say no. She held his gaze, then glanced at her schedule. Professional boundaries remain. Of course. 8:30, she said. 1 hour. He nodded. 1 hour. Back at Armstrong, the board dialed in. Harold Preston appeared in a postage stamp window. Commendable, he said. Also expensive. Trust is the premium tier, Winston replied. We can't discount it. Harold's mouth twitched. Keep me informed. When the call ended, Julian lingered. You sounded like your father. Winston felt it land. Good. Evening burned gold across the lagoon. At 8:27, Winston stood in a private dining room at Echo Pearl with a view that made the city look like a bracelet. He chose simplicity, grilled sea bream, citrus salad, a Bordeaux that played well with humility. He didn't plan to talk deliverables. He planned to say thank you without strategy. Ruby arrived in black again, softer than morning. I almost canceled, she said. Long day. I'm honored, he said. There's fish. Excellent. I like food that pretends to be light and is secretly indulgent. They ate and the conversation loosened. She told him about her first campaign, a no-budget miracle for a women's clinic that needed a waiting room and got a wing. He told her about a youth music program his father funded that survived because nobody put his name on the plaque. I misread you the first night, Ruby said, eyes on the skyline. I thought you were another curated heir. I was, he said. I'm trying to be something else. Silence arrived that wasn't empty. Thank you, he said. Not for optics, for insisting I be legible. Legible is dangerous, she said. People can disagree with what they can finally see. I'll take disagreement over suspicion. Ruby checked her watch. My hour is up. I won't stretch it, he said, standing with her. But today went the way it did because you refused to let me hide. Her mouth curved. Get used to it. We're only at Tuesday. Good night, Winston. Good night, Ruby. She nodded once softly. When the door closed, he let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. Across the bay, a crane swung like a metronome marking a new tempo. He felt the click inside his ribs. Not triumph, not relief. Something steadier. Tomorrow, more cameras. Tomorrow, more proof. Tonight, a single hour that shifted the angle of everything. Rain began as a whisper against the glass of Ruby's penthouse, soft enough to be mistaken for air conditioning, until the city blurred. Winston stood at the window and watched headlights smear along Ozumba Mbadiwe. He had come under the pretext of dropping off investor notes. He had stayed because leaving felt dishonest. Ruby returned from the kitchen with 2 tumblers. Ginger and lime, she said, passing him one. You look like you were rehearsing a press conference to the clouds. I was trying to find a polite way to say, I want to be here without paperwork. She settled on the sofa nearest the window. The room was clean-lined and warm. Walnut shelves, quiet lighting, the authority of a space chosen on purpose. Her jacket was off, sleeves to her elbows, hair loose and slightly unruly, like it had disagreed with a long day in one. We kept the tower above water today, she said. Tomorrow I'll make the regulator like you. Impossible, he said, but I trust the attempt. She watched him the way she watched a graph stabilizing, professionally, but with stakes. You didn't come only to say thank you. No. He took the seat beside her, leaving space that felt both enormous and small. All day I kept almost saying something that wasn't in the strategy deck. Try me. I like you. The words landed without flourish. Not as a headline, not as a rescue. I like you in ways that mess with my rehearsed answers. Her gaze didn't flinch. That's a poor foundation for a boundary. I know, and I know we agreed on professional. He turned his glass. I agreed because I respect you. I still do. So why are you here? Because being near you felt like the only honest part of my day. Silence gathered, full rather than empty. The rain thickened. Somewhere a generator coughed and settled. I told myself I would not be another man's detour, she said quietly. Not even for a man who learns sincerity on camera. Then don't be a detour, he said. Be the point. He hadn't meant it to sound like that. He watched the words strike and saw something in her posture loosen, like a string cut from a taut note. She turned toward him. Lagos glittered behind her like stained light. I don't do almost, she said. If this happens, it happens. He nodded. Then let it happen. They reached for each other at the same time. No hesitation, no choreography, a gravity that felt both earned and inevitable. His hand found the line of her jaw. Her fingers slid into his hair. The first kiss was slow, testing a truth they had already admitted without language. The second had no patience. The third forgot they had ever been other people in other rooms. They didn't speak for a long while. The rain praised the glass. When words returned, they were breath against skin. Stay, she said. Yes, he said. They were careful and reckless, reverent and hungry, laughing once when a phone vibrated and they ignored it like an old habit. They learned each other's edges and ease. They learned how quickly certainty changes shape. They didn't narrate it. They didn't need to. It was all the things pride had postponed, snatched and shared, and wonderfully simple. Later, when the room had settled, Winston lay on his back and watched Ruby breathe. He felt lightheaded from the absence of distance. She rolled onto her stomach and propped her chin on her hands, hair shadowing her cheek. Tell me you're not going to pretend this didn't happen, she said. I'm already memorizing it. It is easier to be your best self when the camera's on. I know, he said. Tomorrow we'll have crews and board calls and a regulator who prefers bullet points to feelings. He angled toward her. But I want to try, without armor, with you. That requires putting pride in the drawer, she said. Both of us. I've been staging exhibitions of pride for years, he said. I can hang something else. She laughed softly. You sound like a man in trouble. I am, he said, happily. They fell quiet. The quiet felt like a signed document. Eventually, Ruby slid from the bed and tied a robe. She stood by the window, slim before a city of light. He joined her. They watched a boat move across the black water, a silver trail unfurling like an afterthought. This will complicate work, she said. I'll follow your lead in the office, he replied. And your lead here, if you want it. I want partnership, she said. At work, in life, if we're brave enough. We can be, he said. Her hand slipped into his. He kissed her hair, surprised by its simplicity. Then we try, she said. We try. Morning would ask for clarity. People would ask for labels and timelines and guarantees they had no right to demand. The board would sniff, the market would blink. Pride would look for a way back in, rehearsing old lines about control and escape. But for now, the rain had washed the city clean, and two people stood in a room that felt like a beginning. His phone buzzed again. He silenced it without looking. Ruby smiled as if she had won an argument no one else could hear. Breakfast tomorrow? He asked. I make ruthless omelets. Bring coffee, she said, and the courage to tell me when you disagree. Deal. They let the quiet hold them. Across the lagoon, cranes stood like punctuation at the end of a sentence they were still writing. He didn't know the twist to come. Complications, old loyalties. The leak Ruby suspected gaining a dangerous rhythm. But he knew this. He wanted the story with her, not about her. When sleep finally found them, it felt less like surrender and more like permission to begin. Outside, the rain kept time for their fragile, fearless beginning. Evelyn Armstrong's sitting room was a study in calculated authority. Ivory upholstery, fresh orchids, an unobstructed view of Banana Island's quiet waterways. It was the kind of space where deals were sealed without a pen ever touching paper. Winston sat across from his mother, jacket off but posture deliberate, sensing a storm that would arrive in silk rather than thunder. You're smiling too easily these days, Evelyn said, pouring tea with the precision of a jeweler weighing stones. That only happens when a woman is involved. Winston's brows lifted. Maybe I'm simply pleased with the tower's progress. She set the teapot down with a muted click. I've spoken to people. Ruby Okinawa, CEO, media queen, boss lady, heels sharp enough to draw blood. She's not the kind of woman who loves a man, she manages him. He kept his tone even. You don't know her. I know her type, Evelyn replied. Self-sufficient to the point of arrogance. No inclination to soften for anyone. She will not protect you. She will not love you the way a wife should. The way a wife should, he repeated. She'll never bow her head to keep peace. A woman like that respects only her own counsel. Evelyn's eyes, sharp as glass, fixed on him. That's dangerous for a man in your position. He let the words hang before answering. You've been choosing women who would bow their heads to keep your peace, mother. That's the difference. Her lips thinned. Those women understand loyalty. Loyalty isn't submission, Winston said, and respect isn't about who yields first. Evelyn leaned back, crossing her legs. I could control them because they understood the family's image. They would protect you and me from scandal, distraction, and weakness. You mean they'd protect your control, he said, heat finally threading his voice. Ruby doesn't need anyone to validate her existence, and that terrifies you. It concerns me, Evelyn corrected. It shouldn't, he said, because for the first time in a long time, I'm with someone who speaks her mind even when I don't like it. Someone who challenges me to be better at my job and my life. She doesn't just care about the Armstrong name. She cares about whether I deserve it. That sounds like infatuation, Evelyn said quietly. It sounds like truth, Winston replied. And if you can't see the value in that, then maybe the problem isn't her. Her eyes held his for a long beat. The air between them felt taut, almost audible. You're serious about her, she said at last. Yes. Serious enough to risk the family's disapproval. Yes, he said again. Evelyn studied him as if searching for cracks. You've never defended one of my introductions. Because I never wanted any of them, Winston said. You wanted women you could steer. I want a partner who can steer with me. Something flickered in her gaze. Not approval, but something softer than resistance. This will make your life harder. Maybe, he admitted, but it will make it honest. That evening, Ruby sat at her desk in the Okinawa media boardroom, reviewing campaign analytics. She looked up when Winston appeared in the doorway, the skyline framing him like the end of a story she didn't expect. You look like a man who's fought a battle, she said. I did, he said, stepping inside. With my mother. Her pen stilled. About me. He nodded. She thinks you're the wrong kind of woman for me. Too independent. Too strong. Not willing to bend. Ruby leaned back, crossing her arms. She's not wrong about that last part. I know, he said, smiling faintly. And it's exactly why I told her I'm not walking away. The words landed heavier than she expected. You said that to her? Word for word. Maybe with fewer expletives. Ruby tilted her head. Why? You could have just kept things casual, avoided the drama. Because I'm not interested in keeping things casual with you, he said. And because I want you to know that I'll stand in front of anyone who tries to cut you down, even if it's my own mother. She studied him for a long moment. Winston Armstrong, who had once been content to drift through curated introductions and shallow connections, was looking at her like she was not an option, but the choice. You realize I don't need protecting, she said. Of course, he replied, but that doesn't mean I won't do it. Something inside her shifted, like a lock turning. Ruby had been measured against impossible standards her entire career, labeled too ambitious, too sharp, too unwilling to play the expected role. She had learned not to expect men, especially men like Winston, to choose her, when it meant standing against the people who shaped them. Yet here he was, unflinching. Evelyn will keep testing me, she said. She can, Winston replied. We'll keep answering. Ruby's mouth curved, slow and thoughtful. We. Yes, we, he said. If you want it. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk. You're serious. Serious enough to tell my mother that she's wrong. he said, serious enough to make this a partnership instead of a detour. The air between them warmed. Ruby exhaled, not in surrender but in acknowledgement. Then maybe I should stop pretending I haven't been thinking about what this could be. Maybe you should, he said. She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes. Fine, I'll give it a chance, but you'd better be worth the trouble. He grinned. You have no idea. Later, as they stood side by side at the window, Lagos sprawled below them in golden shadow. Ruby slipped her hand into his, not as a concession, but as a statement. In that moment, Winston knew two things with absolute clarity. His mother wouldn't approve anytime soon, and he didn't care. Because Ruby Okinawa wasn't here to be chosen for him, she was here because they'd chosen each other. The Armstrong boardroom was built for spectacle. A curved wall of glass overlooking Banana Island's manicured shoreline, a table so long it could host a state dinner, and lighting that made every surface gleam. Winston took his usual seat at the head, Ruby at his right, her tablet already awake with briefing notes. They were there to present the next phase of Ocean Crest Tower's restoration plan to select investors and, by Evelyn Armstrong's design, trusted family allies. The double doors opened, and Evelyn swept in wearing a dove-gray suit, her pearls catching the morning light. Behind her was Serena Whitmore, a family friend Winston had known since his university days abroad. She was elegant in a way that seemed rehearsed, her smile wide enough to register but never reach her eyes. Serena will be joining us, Evelyn said lightly as she took the seat opposite Winston. She's been advising on luxury property branding in Europe and has graciously offered her insight. Ruby's gaze flicked to Winston, a silent question. He didn't look away. Of course, he said evenly. Welcome, Serena. The presentation began smoothly. Ruby outlined the PR milestones achieved so far, complete with improved investor sentiment graphs. Serena listened, then leaned forward, her manicured nails resting on the table. It's an impressive effort, Serena said, though I wonder if a softer, more traditional approach might serve better for investors of a certain caliber. Less transparency about internal processes, more focus on heritage and family continuity. Ruby smiled politely. Transparency is the foundation of rebuilding trust. It's what turned investor sentiment around in the first place. True, Serena replied, her tone honeyed, but some audiences find too much detail unsettling. A woman's touch can make a project feel more secure without overburdening people with operational realities. Ruby recognized the subtext instantly. A woman's touch, provided it's not yours. She kept her voice even. I believe substance outlasts charm in a volatile market. We can have both, but one without the other is short-lived. Evelyn's eyes flicked between them. Serena's point has merit, she said smoothly. Stability sometimes means knowing when to simplify the message. Winston's pen tapped once against the table. And Ruby's point has merit too. Stability also means building credibility that can't be shaken by the next rumor or inspection. This project isn't a social season. It's a 40-story landmark. Serena tilted her head, studying him. Of course, Winston. I only meant that certain women are better suited to safeguarding a man's legacy. Ruby didn't flinch, but Winston felt the hit. He set his pen down deliberately. I don't need someone to safeguard my legacy by staying quiet, Serena. I need someone who can build it with me, stand beside me, and, when necessary, tell me I'm wrong. The room went still. Evelyn's lips pressed together. Serena's polite mask flickered for half a second. That's a rare stance, Serena said finally. It's the only stance I have, Winston replied. Ruby is leading this crisis recovery because she's the most capable person for the job, not because she fits into an image someone else approves of. That's the beginning and end of it. Julian cleared his throat, breaking the tension. Shall we move to the next phase projections? The rest of the meeting passed in tight, polite efficiency. Serena contributed little after that, her earlier confidence tempered. Evelyn maintained her composure, but Winston caught the glint in her eye that told him the exchange had been noted and would not be forgotten. When the room finally cleared, Ruby lingered by the glass wall, watching the yachts trace white arcs through the lagoon. Winston joined her. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Yes, I did. You just stood up to your mother and her hand-picked contender, in her territory." "She can host the meeting," he said, "but she doesn't get to choose my partner." Ruby turned to face him. "Partner?" "In every sense," he said, holding her gaze. "Unless you don't want that." Her pulse jumped, but she kept her voice measured. "You realize she's not going to make this easy. She's never made anything easy, but she's not the one I'm building this with. You are." For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the lagoon shimmered under the midday sun, oblivious to the fault lines shifting inside the room. "You're making this sound serious," Ruby said. "It is serious," he replied. "And if I haven't made that clear enough before, I'm making it clear now, in front of the only people who think they get a say in it." Her lips curved, not in amusement, but in something warmer, more dangerous. "You've just given me more reason to see where this goes." "Good," he said, "because I'm not interested in half measures with you." Ruby let her eyes rest on his for a long moment before she nodded. "Then let's see where it goes." That night in her penthouse, Ruby replayed the moment Winston's voice cut clean through the boardroom politeness. He hadn't just defended her competence. He had claimed her place at his side, and not behind closed doors, but in front of the very people whose approval carried weight in his world. It wasn't the kind of grand gesture that could be mistaken for theatrics. It was precise, calculated, and utterly unshakable. She had told herself she didn't need a man to stand up for her. That was still true, but knowing Winston would, without hesitation, was something else entirely. For the first time since this started, she let herself imagine what it might be like to stop holding back. Ruby's penthouse held warm light. Beyond the windows, Lagos breathed in glass and neon. She stood there, chin high, arms folded. Winston let himself in and paused, reading the quiet. "I'm tired, Winston," she said, still watching the lagoon. He came beside her. "From what?" "From being polite," she said. "From sitting at tables where I'm weighed like an acquisition and told to smile through it. From letting someone dear to you treat me as a phase you'll outgrow." She turned, fierce and luminous. "I was confident and established before you. I refuse to shrink for anyone, your mother included. I'm not asking you to choose. I'm telling you I won't remain where I'm disrespected." He held her gaze. "You won't have to. Not in my home, not in my company, not in my family. I'll protect you, us, without flinching." She searched his face for performance and found none. "Words are cheap in our world." "Then let me spend something better," he said. He touched her cheek, and the room shifted. The first kiss was careful, a pledge. The second peeled back pride. The third erased distance. They moved with clarity of people finally telling the truth. Lagos blurred to stars against the glass. It wasn't frantic, it was intentional, hungry and tender at once. He told her he loved her, first in a whisper, then again when her hands framed his face. They found a rhythm that felt like promise. When they stilled, the city seemed nearer. Like a witness, they lay quietly. Winston traced the curve of her shoulder. "I love you, Ruby Okinawa. I suspected it the night we argued about integrity and you didn't blink." She smiled. "I love you, Winston Armstrong. Not the version on magazine covers. The stubborn, careful man who chose me when it wasn't easy." He kissed her palm, then sat up. "Come to dinner tomorrow. Family. No performative neutrality. Be there with me." "That's bold," she said. "It's necessary," he answered. The Armstrong dining room looked ready for a portrait, crystal bright, mahogany glowing, flowers central and deliberate. Evelyn sat at the head, composed, pearls immaculate. Around the table, directors, old friends, allies who watched for weakness. Winston led Ruby to the seat at his right. Conversations faltered, then resumed too brightly. The first course passed with diplomacy. Questions arrived dressed as compliments. Ruby answered without apology. Winston noticed the way Evelyn's smile narrowed whenever Ruby refused to genuflect to subtext. Midway through the main, Evelyn set down her fork. It is unusual, Winston, to invite someone so new to a dinner of this tenor. She isn't here to audition, he said. I never suggested she was, Evelyn replied. But Prudence. Winston's chair scraped as he stood. Mother. The room stilled. I'll be direct, he said. I won't entertain tests disguised as etiquette. Ruby isn't temporary. She is my partner, in sense and substance. If that makes tonight uncomfortable, I can live with uncomfortable. A flicker crossed Evelyn's face. Surprise and then something tender she tried to smother. Before anyone could fill the silence, Winston reached into his jacket and lowered to one knee. Gasps. Ruby's hand flew to her mouth. He opened a small box. The ring caught the chandelier like a promise. Ruby Okinawa, he said, steady as a vow. I am not asking you to fit into my world. I am asking to build the next one with you. Will you marry me? Time thinned. Ruby looked from the ring to his eyes, then at the room that had wanted to define her. She took the box but didn't answer at once. When she spoke, her voice carried. When I met you, she said, I thought you were comfortable with the performance of power. Then I watched you choose accountability over charm, truth over convenience, and us over optics. I know I wasn't the wife you imagined for your son, she added to Evelyn, but I love him. Not his headlines, not his holdings. Him. I will challenge him, shield him, and stand beside him, and I will never ask him to be smaller than he is. If that isn't what you wanted, I understand. But I won't stop being myself. Silence held for a heartbeat. Evelyn's composure wavered. The woman showed through the matriarch. I was wrong, she said, unarmored. I tried to choose for my son because I was choosing for myself, what would be easy to manage and predict. I forgot the point of love is not control, but courage. Her eyes shone. I'm sorry, Ruby. The air changed, softer, breathable. Ruby turned back to Winston. Everything's simple now. Yes, she said, and the word felt like opening a door. Applause began, then grew. Winston slid the ring onto her finger. His hands shook, not with doubt but with relief that felt like light. He stood and she stepped into him, and the people who measured everything watched something immeasurable take its seat at the table. Evelyn rose, a small smile unlearning old habits. Welcome to the family, she said, voice roughened by truth. Ruby inclined her head. Thank you. Conversation resumed, more human. Winston barely tasted what followed. The meal continued. Toast found words. The night moved forward. But all of it orbited the quiet at his center. Ruby's hand in his, warm, undeniable. Later on the terrace, Lagos lay in a jeweled hush. Boats stitched silver into the water. You didn't warn me, she murmured. I wanted to say it where it mattered, he said, where people who thought they could decide for me had to hear me decide. She leaned against his shoulder. That took courage. It took you, he said. He kissed her temple and felt the future align. Not easy, not tidy, true. The city's lights, the ring's weight, his mother's apology, the steadiness in Ruby's eyes. Every piece belonged. Ready? He asked. For the rest, she said. For all of it, she laced their fingers. Yes. And the skyline approved, gleaming tonight. The morning of their wedding broke over Lagos in ribbons of gold, the lagoon a mirror for the rising sun. The Armstrong Estates gardens had been transformed overnight into something out of a dream. An aisle of white orchids and blush roses winding beneath a canopy of silk drapes, crystal chandeliers suspended between palm trees, and the sound of a live string quartet weaving through the air. Guests arrived in tailored suits and flowing gowns, the kind of guest list that made the society pages hum. Senators, CEOs, old money matriarchs, and new generation entrepreneurs. But Winston didn't see any of them. Standing at the altar in a charcoal three-piece suit, he saw only the space where Ruby would walk. And then she appeared. The crowd stilled, as if the city itself had paused. Ruby came down the aisle in a gown of silk crepe that hugged her figure before spilling into a cathedral-length train. The bodice was cut with regal precision, The neckline softened with delicate lace, her veil anchored by a diamond comb Evelyn herself had given her that morning. She carried no bouquet, only a single white orchid in her hand, understated but impossibly elegant. Winston's breath caught. This was the woman who had dismantled his cynicism and built something better in its place. When she reached him, he took her hand and whispered so only she could hear, "You are my forever." The ceremony was simple by Armstrong standards, but rich in meaning. Vows were spoken with eyes locked, the officiant's words a thread around them. Evelyn watched from the front row, her gaze soft with something Ruby had never seen there before, pride without condition. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Winston kissed Ruby with the kind of certainty that left no room for applause, though applause roared anyway. The reception unfolded in a glass pavilion overlooking the lagoon, the sunset staining the water rose gold. Long tables glittered with crystal and candlelight, each place set with gold-rimmed china and handwritten menus. Guests danced between courses. A jazz band played renditions of their favorite songs. Evelyn stood to give her toast. "I once believed I knew the kind of woman my son needed," she began, glancing at Ruby with a rueful smile. "I was wrong. He needed Ruby, someone who challenges him, steadies him, and makes him braver than I ever imagined. Ruby, thank you for teaching me that love is not about control, but about trust. And Winston, thank you for proving that even mothers can learn." Glasses lifted. Ruby felt Winston's hand squeeze hers under the table. As the evening deepened, they stole a moment on the terrace away from the music. The night air was warm, the city lights stretching out like constellations at their feet. "There's something I haven't told you yet," Ruby said, her voice low. He turned to her, brows lifting. "And you choose our wedding night for this?" She smiled a little nervously. "It seemed appropriate. I'm pregnant." The world tilted in the best way. Winston blinked, then laughed, a sound so unguarded it startled even him. "Pregnant," he repeated, tasting the word. "You mean we're going to have a baby?" she finished for him, her eyes shining. He took her face in his hands and kissed her, slow and deep, then rested his forehead against hers. "I didn't think I could feel fuller than I do right now. You've proven me wrong again." From the doorway, Evelyn's voice carried softly. "Did I just hear what I think I heard?" Ruby and Winston turned to see her standing there, her expression unreadable for a moment, until it softened completely. She came forward, placing a hand on Ruby's cheek. "I suppose congratulations are in order. For both of you. And for me." Ruby smiled. "You're going to be a grandmother." Evelyn's eyes shimmered. "I intend to be the best one Lagos has ever seen." Later, as the final song played and the guests prepared to send them off, Winston looked around the room. His wife radiant under the lights, his mother laughing with Julian and Sloane. The people who mattered gathered without pretense. They stepped into the waiting car, hands still clasped. As the driver pulled away, Ruby leaned her head on his shoulder. "You ready for this next chapter?" she asked. He kissed the top of her head. "I've been ready since the day you made me throw away my script." The car turned onto the bridge, the lagoon glittering beneath them. Behind them, fireworks bloomed over the estate, Evelyn's last-minute addition. Ahead of them lay a future already in motion, a home filled with light, a child they couldn't wait to meet, and a love that had weathered every test placed in its way. And for the first time, Winston realized the best part wasn't that the world approved, it was that they didn't need it.